But how often have we talked about what our fears or anxieties are with our financial advisor? And if you look at it, a lot of times our financial advisor has like the basic information, my name, my social, who's in my family, hopefully they have that, what my assets are, those types of things, my date of birth, those things that are usually on a form that's used during account opening. And as they get to know you more, they start knowing little more aspects about your life. They start to get to know your interests and hobbies because you talked about, I love to travel, right? So my advisor knows I travel and they'll ask me about those things and we'll start off a conversation there. But has he ever asked me what's my biggest fear?
Welcome to Knowing Me, Knowing You, the podcast for the future of wealth management. Thanks for being here. I'm Marla Sofer. Money is a tool. It empowers people. Let's dive into how technology is personalizing advice, strengthening connections, and creating lasting impact. If you're an advisor looking to differentiate, a fintech leader shaping the next wave, or a client ready to take control of your financial future, you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hello, and today we have the pleasure of speaking with Rod Sayegh, a visionary leader with over 25 years in the finance industry. As the Chief Digital Officer at Fiduciary Trust Company International, where he has been for nearly 6 years, Rod is at the forefront of integrating digital innovation into wealth management. His extensive experience includes a notable 22-year tenure at Wells Fargo, where he spearheaded digital initiatives to enhance client and advisor experiences. Beyond his professional achievements, Rod is also recognized as a notable LGBTQIA leader by Crain's New York business for 2 consecutive years, reflecting his commitment to diversity and inclusion within the industry. He and his partner founded a nonprofit artist residency for LGBT artists in New York City, one of the first of its kind. Rod, welcome to the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast.
Thanks, Marla. Thanks for having me.
I'm thrilled to have you. And we always start with an optimistic question. Today, I don't know when this is going to be promoted, but whoever is listening to this, we are recording on a very, very down day in the market. And so we start on an optimistic note. Rod, what is exciting to you about the moment that we're in related to wealth management?
I love change. I think if change happened every day, I would be completely happy. And I think right now, with the intersection of technology, people getting a lot more real with what they want, changes in the air and changing people's hearts and minds, of course, but changing the way the advisor thinks, changing the way the client thinks as well, and getting clients to be a lot more honest and open with what they want. And society allows that now to happen more and more. And that's what is really exciting to me.
What better personality profile for somebody who runs digital than somebody who loves change and sees the opportunity in change and sees the innovation and the ability to really help people achieve their dreams. So I feel like, wow, it sounds like you're a right person, right role. And as you are in this role and have been running technology for such a long time, you've had such a distinguished career. Can you share a bit about what you do as the Chief Digital Officer at Fiduciary? And then I'd love to learn a little bit more about pivotal moments or projects that you've worked on, whether at Wells or Fiduciary, that have really influenced your approach to integrating digital and wealth together.
Sure. So a Chief Digital Officer really plays on the business side more than I would say on the engineering or technology side of the house. My role specifically is in designing processes and applications both for the advisor as well as the clients, what the client sees online and how the advisor manages that relationships, how they see the client's information, how they visualize all of that stuff, workflow processes. That is what my team does. That's really on the product side of digital is kind of how I frame that answer around it. And what I really love is it's a creative role in a very structured company. And so a lot of times in financial services, there's not a lot of creative type of roles that are really in the business. And so this allows us to be a little more creative with how we deliver the experience to our clients through tools and technology around that. Some of the items that have really shaped my career and the way I think is first is just having great leaders and great managers who really allow you to expand your ideas and your mind and really practice with those types of things as you roll out new tools and technology. One of the tools we did at Wells Fargo was something called Mobile Advisor. And it was really bringing the advisor desktop to an iPad or a tablet. It was one of the first that was done in the industry for high net worth, ultra high net worth. One of the things I really wanted to do, and it goes back to a mantra that I always have, which is transparency, transparency, transparency. I feel that the more firms can be transparent with their clients, whether it's financial industry or not, the better the outcome. I think it's the same thing in personal relationships as it is professional relationships. The more you can be open and honest with what you want or what you're looking for, or having those discussions really gets to a better end product. One of the things we wanted to do with that tablet was basically be able to turn it to a client and let the client interact with the tablet and their own information. Much like a lot of companies, Wells had a card exercise to try to get clients to talk about what were their biggest issues or biggest problems that they would want to solve. And what we did was we digitized that process. And in a few sessions, Wells used to have these rooms where we had two-way mirrors. So I got to sit behind a two-way mirror, which is if you've never sat behind a two-way mirror, you should really try it. It's really interesting, and really observe some of our advisors using the tool with clients. There's this one situation where with a prospect, I asked the advisor to start with the wife first. And a lot of times in financial services, what we would see, especially in these meetings, is the husband would do all the talking and the wife would just sit there and really not say much, and they weren't really engaged. So what we did with the prospect is we asked the advisor to start with the wife and hand her the device and actually have her go through and say what her top issues were, her top 3 or 4 issues. And at the same time, we asked the advisor to talk to the husband about something completely different that was social, nothing financially related. And when the wife was done, the iPad switched to the husband. The husband did the same type of thing. And again, we wanted the advisor to talk to the wife about something completely not financial related. And what the system did is it actually showed both the husband and wife their results together, where they aligned and where they didn't align. And then I asked the advisor to basically zip it and not say anything and just observe the conversation that happened between those two. And we often see in financial services, I think it's with a lot of things. Even if you're going to, let's say, buy a new stove for your house, it's like you and your partner are talking about the things you want on the way to the store, right? Or on the way to the financial services appointment or the way to somewhere else. And you're really not taking the time to have that conversation beforehand. So just listening to that conversation go back and forth, and the husband really saying for the first time, I didn't know that was on your mind. I didn't know that was a real priority for you. I didn't know you were concerned about that. And that really allowed that advisor to advise those prospects on what the company could do for them. And that original prospect was valued about $3 million. They ended up bringing $50 million as a result.
Wow.
So when you look back on transparency, right, and having transparent conversations, and I think sometimes for the advisors, just listen and not say anything, it's really powerful. So those type of situations is really what has shifted. And I think if you look at a lot of the younger generation who get kind of hammered for being loud and proud and out there and demanding from companies what they want, I think it's no different for the older generation. They just were never given the license in order to do so. So I like to thank the younger generation, those millennials and Gen Z, for really trying to push the boundaries for us older folk.
That's really helpful to understand. And I love that you shared that story, because what you're expressing is that people's relationship with money is emotional, it's personal, and that you have individuals that might not even understand their partners. And when they come in and work with a professional, that the professional's role is not only to push a product, it's to get them to open up and connect with each other and with that professional to help them achieve their goals. Now, your role, and what I love about what you explained about how the mobile advisor played a role in transparency and getting the client to engage, is how does digital fit into that mix? How are you going to kind of introduce something in an industry that we've known, it's been proven time and again, the human has to be core. It is a human-centric industry. We know that connections are best made with humans. And digital, I would love to take your take on it. But when you think about how digital plays a role, it has to empower and tighten and deepen that connection, but not come in the middle of it. It should never be a wedge. It should be a supplement. So I wonder, when you think about digital innovation at Fiduciary or even at Wells, how have you found it as a path to not displacing and improving the client experience and advisor experience, using digital as that path to transparency?
Yeah, here at Fiduciary Trust, we took a digital first approach to rebuilding a lot of our tools. And one of the hallmarks of that transparency is let digital be the table that the advisor and the client meet on versus, a 90-page PowerPoint presentation or 120-page PowerPoint presentation. What's interesting is when you look at experiences out in the world, the better experiences touch all five senses or touch as many senses as possible. And when you're working in financial services, it's really hard to touch all five senses, right? Taste, touch, smell, etc. And what you have to do is try to find ways that digital can try to touch more than one sense that's out there so the client has more of an immersive experience. And I'm not necessarily talking about VR and having a client run around the room, thinking about what their retirement is. One of the tools we developed here was something called the client meeting experience. And we took a 90 to 120 page deck that the client gets every quarter. They come in for, 3 or 4 hour meeting. They go through all of their financial services, what has been done in their portfolio, talk about performance, the market, etc. And they do that sometimes quarterly. And it takes a lot of time for our relationship associates and our relationship managers, about 30 hours on average, to put together that deck. They're downloading formulas, they're recreating a lot of things. And what we want to do is shrink down that time to something a lot more manageable. And we got it down to about 30 minutes by walking them through a wizard that gets them all that information and puts it in a format for them to work with the client so they can actually spend those, let's say if it was 30 hours, those 29 hours extra with the client and doing what they wanted with the client. And the advisor has two ways of working with the client. They can either print out that piece of paper, because a lot of clients want that paper and they want to make notes, et cetera, on it. But a lot of times what we've transitioned to is actually putting that interactive dashboard of all the client's information up on the screen and allowing the user, whether the user in this case, again, I'm all about letting the advisor and the client play on the same tool or same tablet, right? They both should think that this is a joined experience. So either the client or the advisor could take the mouse, as it were, and they could click through their information. So we gave the advisor a way to change time periods, click through things. If the client was asking, how much did I spend last year? Instead of just giving them a number, which we can, let's say you spent $100,000 last year. A lot of times clients will say, no, I didn't. And so what we wanted to do was, if you click on that number, it actually shows you all the transactions that made up that $100,000. So it's transparent in that way as well. And there are some meetings where we've observed where the client has grabbed the mouse out of the advisor's hand and started clicking around. So that is a tactile, right, touch type of experience that digital can bring that paper could not bring to that same type of experience. Also the ability for the client to ask the advisor any question and the advisor not to say, oh, I didn't run that report. Let me go look at something, where they can actually change, again, time periods, filters, that type of thing, and get directly to what the client wants to talk about or what the client wants to see. So that client meeting experience allows that tool to be interactive and digital and touch a new sense that we don't get to see in a lot of meetings or a lot of financial plans or advisors.
I love how you started by framing it as the table that they meet on. When people connect with people, it's often over a table. When you're going out to dinner, when you're meeting with family, I love that you're kind of using that analogy and then bringing in this idea that the experience should touch multiple senses. One of the things that came to mind for me, and you referenced, they're getting information. It used to be a 30-hour process. Now you're doing it in this 30-minute process. They're gathering information. And my question is, how? From where? How is that data differentiated? What is the information? And you're thinking about how wealth management is increasingly driven by data. Data is call it the meal on the table, where we're sharing information and connecting with each other over data, as opposed to over a nice glass of wine and whatever it might be. Hopefully both. A lot of firms struggle with translating information into something meaningful. So how is fiduciary, or how do you see wealth management shifting its approach so that this information being served on the table is being discovered effectively? It's driving engagement effectively. It's really hitting, purpose and meaning and what the client really wants to see out of that meeting.
So one of the things that in order to prepare for this project that we did, this client meeting experience, is we brought in an outside firm, and I wanted them to talk to our clients. Because one of the things was the advisors were very hell-bent on having this PowerPoint presentation because that's what they've always did and that's what the client expected. And, we don't want to change client expectations or anything else like that. But somewhere in the back of my mind, I wanted to challenge that because as I said earlier, I love change. So I hired a design firm to interview our clients. And so we videotaped them and audio recorded them. They knew that was going on. So we could play that back to our advisors. And what came out of that, it was, we asked them, what do you think about this experience that Fiduciary has, every quarter or every year for you? And a lot of them came back and said, I like that we have it. I understand why we have it. Sometimes I just come for the lunch. I think this is sometimes more for Fiduciary than for me. I like to get the materials earlier. So we got a lot of mixed messages from it. They all knew they had to have it, right? They had this feeling that they had to have it, but why they were having it was a different story. And then, what do I do with this 90-page PDF? Has all my personal financial information with me, and cybersecurity risk is growing. What do I do with it? Sometimes we'd put this in 3-ring binders. There was so much paperwork in there. And one of the questions that they were all asked was, if you had 15 minutes with your advisor, what would you want them to know and what would you want to discuss? And that was really trying to get at the heart of what was most important. And there was 3 central themes. The one is, how am I doing performance-wise? You can't get away from performance, whether you're a long-term investor or short-term investor. Performance is always key. And oftentimes in these reports, it's the last page. And in the two-way mirror, you would see clients go right to the last page, even though the advisor had this whole buildup before that. The other 2 things I think are the key, which is, I want to be able to tell the advisor what's going on in my life, what has changed. And the other one was, am I doing okay? Am I doing fine? And those 3 things, more so the last 2 things, should be the crux of every conversation that you're having with any advisor. If you're worried about, which a lot of people are worried about the market right now, what's going on, is you're really trying to ask, how am I doing? Your question might come across as, what should we be doing, or should I be worried or whatnot? But what you really want to know is, am I still going to be okay, or how much more can I handle until I'm not okay? That's really where the conversation should be based on. So one of the things we do with this project when clients come in is we put planning front and center. An advisor can't uncheck the planning module. They can choose to uncheck other modules, but they can't choose to uncheck that planning module. And they kind of have to go through it, as well as they have the option to look at their investment policy statement. Are we still on the same page? Do we still agree that this is your risk tolerance with everything going on, that this is the way we're investing? And the client can see that right up at front. And if it needs to make changes, it can. The other thing we implemented was a notepad. And this seems very remedial, but we put a notepad directly there, and we observed in some cases where advisors were taking notes directly on the screen, and the client said, "Oh, that's not what I meant. I meant this. Can you change that?"
Yeah, it's the table. When you've got both of them at the table together.
That's right. And it's one thing to visualize. If I'm putting tasks on there and I say, okay, I'm going to make this recommendation and you owe me an answer by this date, and here's what I need from you, and here's what I'm going to do. It's kind of this unspoken contract between the client and the advisor. And it makes the client feel a lot more connected to their plan, to their advisor, and what's going on. But it goes back to transparency. Digital is the table we meet on, and just really sharing all of that information and letting the conversation flourish within the room.
What if financial planning wasn't just about numbers, but about you, your values, your goals, your vision for the future? Nomi is transforming client discovery for wealth managers, going beyond assets and risk scores to uncover what truly matters. With behavioral insights and real-time data, Nomi helps advisors personalize advice, build deeper connections, and grow their businesses. Because the best financial decisions start with knowing you. Discover the future of client engagement at nomi.com. I love that you mentioned that as it relates to your 3 themes in the 15 minutes: performance, changes in my life, and am I okay? There's an interplay across those 3. They're dynamically reliant on each other.
That's right.
And I think our industry is very, very comfortable talking about performance in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
We get very, very uncomfortable on the other 2 because it demands that deeper understanding. And sometimes they might not have it. And your story you shared about the notepad is a perfect reflection of that. Is advisor might feel that they really deeply understand their client, but when they took the note, the client called them out and said, wait a second, you didn't get that exactly right. And so just that tiny change of the notepad and taking the note and showing makes the client feel like you're giving me an opportunity to feel understood. You're helping me make sure that you can repeat back to me what is the important change in my life and what I mean when I ask, am I okay? So that then hooks into the performance. It's a beautiful story that you shared to highlight it. When you think about the client discovery piece, when you think about wealth management and digital innovation, that notepad is, I think, a perfect story of how you're bringing in digital to help with discovery, because what you're offering is a real-time opportunity for an advisor to jot down, here's what I heard, and the client to say, that's not what I meant. Are there other aspects of discovery specifically, or data, that information that's going back and forth that helps with gathering the changes or gathering your definition of okay that you've kind of looked at or considered?
Yeah. One of the things that we're playing around with right now is called the segmentation of one. A lot of clients in other companies, they segment their client based on AUM. Or let's say when you go buy any type of product that's out there in the market, whether it's financial or not, there's different levels you can buy, level, premier, basic, et cetera. But when you look at a segmentation of one, it's really moving away from grouping clients based on a certain attribute. You can still cluster them, for events or things like that. But how often have we talked about what our fears or anxieties are with our financial advisor? And if you look at it, a lot of times our financial advisor has like the basic information, my name, my social, who's in my family. Hopefully they have that, what my assets are, those types of things, my date of birth, those things that are usually on a form that's used during account opening. And as they get to know you more, they start knowing little more aspects about your life. They start to get to know your interests and hobbies, because you talked about, I love to travel, right? So my advisor knows I travel, and they'll ask me about those things, and we'll start off a conversation there. But has he ever asked me what's my biggest fear? Ever asked my partner what his biggest fear is? What keeps us up at night is kind of some of that. But what are my deepest desires, right? That is the heart of trust. So if you think about trust with your partner, your spouse, or things like that, it's really being as vulnerable as you can with that person at home, let's say, that won't judge you for whatever it happens to be that it is, right? That loves you for who you are, or cares for you who you are, and that you could be your most authentic self, and relates to, I think, both health and financial. You need to get as deep with those folks as possible. So if you're not expressing that, then when I call my advisor in a panic, he has no context except for, what everyone else is doing about what fear is it hitting, right, for me. And I think the biggest thing that we can do is, and I'm hoping that the world moves in this way, and certainly in Fiduciary, we're trying to do this, is get clients to talk more about what those feelings are, what those deep desires are, what is the anxiety, what is the angst, what is at the heart of what keeps them up at night. And at the same time, help them to visualize what they want their future to look like. One of the things my advisor tells me is that I need to give him X amount of dollars every year if I want to retire at the age I want to retire. So I have this crazy goal of retiring at 55. I don't want to work until I'm 65. And he says, well, you need to, give me X amount of dollars every year. But when I log on to the website, it doesn't show me a thermometer of how much I've given him, how much I haven't. So I just I assume I'm doing good. And assume I don't know, right? And that plan is kind of stale. But how do I visualize? How do I talk to him about how I want to travel when I'm older? Am I flying economy? Or am I flying business class? Am I staying in a cheap hotel, a nice hotel? Am I taking 1 trip, 2 trips, 3 trips? Do I want to have these types of experiences? What do I want to visualize my life as? And usually the conversations around, let's say, retirement or what happens after we're done with work it's very high level. It's very like, I'm going to, the same thing everyone else wants. No, Marley, your definition of retirement and exactly what you want to do and mine are I can tell you probably completely different, right, about what they'll want to be. But how often are we having those deep conversations? And we need to find ways to help advisors have those conversations, whether it's clients going through simulation, answering some questions, maybe having some deep thought around those, and really pushing that back out and say, okay, this is what we need to talk about, is this. How do we get you here?
Yes, so much of what you said just resonates so strongly. You're definitely speaking the language of the Know Me audience and Know Me itself. And what it is that why we exist is in order to make sure that the conversations are happening about feelings, anxieties, recognizing the heart of what it is that you need your money to help you achieve, and getting super crystal clear about that vision of the future so that it can be supported. And so I really appreciate that you shared those specific examples, and that it's like, if you're making assumptions about what it is I want, then my level of trust in your ability to meet it is going to be questioned. I'm going to have doubt because you didn't even ask me. You don't know what I mean. You don't know if I mean camping or if I mean flying first class or yachting around Europe. And so until you ask, I don't know if you're actually helping me achieve my own definition of my goal, of my vision of the future. I love that. I want to ask one more question before we get to our last one, which is, you have been recognized as a notable LGBTQ leader. It's highlighted your dedication to fostering inclusivity. You shared with me just before we started about the nonprofit that you started with your partner. I would love to learn more about that and your own passion and your own relationship with impact and purpose that you're bringing forth with your own money.
Sure. And thank you for asking for that. The nonprofit's called Fire Island Artist Residency. It's run out in Cherry Grove in Fire Island here in New York, which is one of the first gay towns in all the United States. It's where Truman Capote wrote one of his most famous books out there. So it's got a lot of history. And, these spaces for LGBTQ folks are really sacred in a lot of ways. And so we wanted to make sure we paid homage to that space there in Cherry Grove and in Fire Island in the Pines to really bring back and bring more art to those spaces. And I think with your money, you can, whether that level investment is $5,000, $5, whatever it is, you can choose how you want that spent, and you can choose what you want to have done with that. And it's really around leaving a legacy. My partner is an artist. Having something like that when he was emerging would have been really great for him. He always talks about having that, having mentors come in, having studio visits with other prominent LGBT artists are really important for that sector of folks that are out there. And I think when we do a lot of things in our lives and they're usually focused around our family or for our work, and starting a nonprofit, I would tell anyone, is not easy. It's really difficult and a thankless job. But, when I look at legacy, I look at how I want to be remembered and the contributions, I want to make sure that anyone I've ever mentored from a work perspective remembers me when something's going wrong and they need some help. And in the world, I want to be remembered as someone who helped move something along. And those, I think, are the ways that you can use your money in a good fashion. Like, you can put your money to anything, but it's really trying to make an impact in someone's life. One of the artists we had was about to give up on art completely, and he got accepted to the residency. He couldn't even get out to the island, and we had a strict policy that we weren't going to bring people let's say in my car, things like that, to the residency, just to keep it a level playing field. But we made an exception for this resident, and he has gone on to major fame and fortune for him. And I'm really excited for him. And a few years after the residency, we had lunch with him, and he said, I was about ready to give up. And then I got this opportunity, and it has really changed my life. So that that gives me chills talking about it. We also had
gave me chills.
We also had
this to it.
We also had this lesbian artist come from Uganda, where she was actively being hunted by the police to try to harm her. And she came to the residency and she sought asylum here. And she's selling sculptures for hundreds of thousands of dollars. She's doing wonderful work, but she was in a country who did not value LGBT rights. And literally, she had to run away from the police. So trying to get her over here was one thing, get her to, and our first stop in the United States was Fire Island, Cherry Grove, and Gates Town in the country. So that's what matters, right? That's what matters.
That's phenomenal. I'm so grateful to you for sharing those stories. And what hit me hardest was when you said starting a nonprofit is hard. Whenever you do something that is driven by purpose, meaning, achieving your potential and changing the world in a meaningful way, it's hard. And what gorgeous stories about these two artists that, for whatever reason, fate or whatever it is, brought them to you and to your residency, and their lives were changed. Their impact on all of the people that they have touched through their art has changed the world in a meaningful way. So I've got incredible admiration, very inspiring story. We always end with this question, Rod. What's one instance in your life or a conversation that you've had that has changed your personal relationship with money?
I had a conversation with myself. Really, I was looking at my financial situation. I had accumulated a lot of debt and I know I needed to get rid of that. And I made a conscious decision to not spend and pay down that debt. And when that last credit card was paid off, the relief was astronomical. And now I will never let myself get into that debt. I mean, I was homeless when I was 18. I didn't really have a permanent roof over my head, put stuff on credit cards. No one taught me how to spend, didn't know any of that type of stuff. Took loans out of my 401k, took distributions out of my 401k to pay off debt, but it kept on increasing. And of course, I didn't help myself by living in San Francisco or New York, which are the two most expensive places here in the United States. But I had to make a conscious decision if I really wanted to move forward. And no financial advisor actually told me this. This was me just understanding in the financial industry, it is to pay off that debt. I have a mortgage, which I don't consider the same type of debt, right? But paying that off, I remember doing that. I remember the date it was and the weight that was lifted off my shoulders. I felt for the first time financially free. And whenever that credit card bill gets a little too high for my blood, right, I make payments to it like every week. I will never let myself to get back into that situation. That's the kind of the biggest lesson was, how do I remove this weight from my shoulders so that I can focus on what I want?
I have been so inspired by you during this conversation, Rod. Thank you for sharing your insights on everything from digital innovation and leadership and wealth management to purpose and how to connect people, how to set the table so advisors and clients can connect more effectively, and what that looks like, what it needs to look like, what topics they need to be discussing in order to build trust, which is the product that we sell in wealth management. We are selling trust day in and day out. And if we don't have the tools, then there aren't going to be buyers. And
That's right.
Yes, I think that our differentiation will come from the depth of the connections that we build, from how well and how deeply we understand clients and their definition of, to your point, am I okay? Are you helping me through the changes that I want to go through in my life? Can you help me achieve my vision of the future? Your dedication to enhancing client experiences and promoting inclusivity is a commendable example to the industry. Your personal story, which I'm so glad we got to learn here on the podcast, really inspired me. It definitely gave me chills, and I'm sure it's going to inspire everyone else that listens. I would love, if you don't mind, Rod, if you can share with our listeners two things. One is how they can learn more about Fiduciary, and two, how they might want to learn more about and get involved in your nonprofit.
Sure. For Fiduciary, fiduciarytrust.com. If you go to that website, you'll see all the services that we offer. You can hit a contact me and someone will reach out and talk about what we offer. But first, you're going to need to tell us what you're looking for, and you're going to need to get real honest about your goals and aspirations so that we can do the best job for you and build that trust, especially from a new advisor standpoint. And for the nonprofit, it's fireislandartistresidency.org. And there you can see the work that we're doing with LGBT artists for the last 15 years in the annual residency that runs. There's artwork on that site that you can buy from previous residents or other artists who have donated artwork. We have events. We do public talks to the community. We like to involve everyone as much as possible. So whether you're gay or straight, or anything in between, it is completely open for you to come and join and experience Fire Island Artist Residence.
I don't know how to end this one. It was such a great podcast. I'm so grateful. For our listeners, digital transformation is reshaping wealth management. I think the tips that you got here are that it's not about the numbers. It's not about the money. It's about the connection. It's about connecting deeply. It's about the impact and vision and purpose that you bring to the world and how you're leveraging your money, your access, your own story to achieve that level of impact. So how do you see technology improving the client-advisor relationship? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And Rod, thank you from the bottom of my heart for being on our podcast today.
Thank you, Marla. It was a great experience. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on the Knowing Me, Knowing You podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. Your support helps us bring more transformative conversations to you. Until next time, keep discovering, keep growing, and remember, you're in control of your own financial story. Follow us for more conversations on financial confidence, self-discovery, and the future of money.